Rome, a name that sounds like an echo of former greatness. An empire that stretched from the misty shores of Britain to the sultry sands of North Africa. From the green valleys of the Rhine to the mysterious lands of the Middle East. A civilization that gave the world law, architecture, roads, language, culture. A legacy that still shapes our world. And that empire fell. In textbooks, the story of Rome's fall is often presented as simple and even primitive. Rome fell because it was attacked by barbarians. Or Rome fell into luxury and debauchery, lost its former valor, and therefore could not resist the onslaught of savage tribes. Sounds logical, doesn't it? A simple explanation for a complex phenomenon. Barbarians attacked, Romans weakened, and that's the end of the story. But was it really that shallow? Did one of the most powerful civilizations in history collapse because of some barbarians and depravity? Did centuries of history, a complex political and economic system, a unique culture, just crumble like a house of cards from the raids of savage tribes and moral decay? If you've ever wondered about this, if you've felt any inconsistency in this simplistic picture, then you've come to the right place. In this video, we'll put aside the textbooks and dive into the real story of the fall of Rome. The story is much deeper, fascinating, and disturbing. Think about it. The Roman Empire didn't just exist for centuries. It flourished, adapted, went through crises, wars, dynasties. It was flexible, resilient, had enormous resources and a powerful army. And suddenly, at some point, something went wrong. Something deep, hidden from superficial view, began to eat away at her from the inside. Imagine a huge iceberg floating majestically in the ocean. On the surface, we see only the top, the majesty, the power, the indestructibility. But beneath the water lies the massive, invisible part. That's where the real dangers lurk, the hidden currents, the underwater rocks. The fall of the Roman Empire is not just the barbarians hitting the tip of the iceberg. It is a process of destruction of underlying structures, invisible at first glance. In this video, we go beyond simple answers. We're going to go on a real historical investigation. Consider the fall of Rome as a complex, multifactorial process, as a tangle of problems accumulated over centuries. Dive into the economy, politics, social structure, even the climate and epidemics of that era. Learn about the real reasons behind the facade of barbarian invasions and moral decay. Ready to learn the truth? Ready to shatter stereotypes? Then get ready. We begin our journey into the depths of history to uncover the mystery of the fall of the great Roman Empire. And believe me, what we learn will do more than surprise you. It may change your view of the course of history as a whole. Stay tuned, and in the next chapter, we will begin to unravel this tangle of mysteries and dive into the first key reason hidden behind the simplified version of Rome's fall. Don't miss it. In the last chapter, we began our investigation debunking the myth that Rome fell only because of barbarians and moral decay. We found out that the true causes lie much deeper, like the underwater part of an iceberg. And today, we will delve into one of the most destructive forces that was undermining the foundations of Roman power: economic crisis. The Roman Empire was once an economic giant. A vast network of trade routes linked the provinces, ensuring the flow of goods, gold, and resources. A thriving economy was the foundation of Roman power, allowing the maintenance of a vast army, the construction of magnificent cities, and the provision of the benefits of civilization. But over time, this foundation began to crack. Imagine a golden river continuously feeding the empire with wealth. But gradually, the springs of this river began to dry up, and the riverbed became clogged. One of the first cracks in the economic edifice of Rome was inflation. You may have heard about the Roman emperors starting to flog the coinage. To cover rising costs, they reduced the precious metal content of coins, adding cheap impurities. At first glance, the solution seems simple: more coins, more money. But economics is tricky. More cheap money led to higher prices. Goods became more expensive, gold drained from the economy, and the purchasing power of the population fell. Inflation was the real scourge of the late Roman Empire. But inflation was only the tip of the iceberg. Trade, the empire's circulatory system, also began to fail. Barbarian invasions, piracy on the seas, highway robbers, all made trade routes dangerous and expensive. The flow of goods decreased, economic ties between provinces were broken, and the empire lost unity not only politically, but also economically. In addition, it was becoming increasingly difficult for the empire to collect taxes. Corruption flourished, officials abused their power, and the population, tired of constant taxation, increasingly evaded taxes. The army and the state apparatus required huge funds, and revenues to the treasury were decreasing. It was a vicious circle. The worse the economic situation became, the more difficult it was to correct it. And finally, we should not forget about agriculture, the basis of the economy of any agrarian civilization. Soil depletion, climate change, perhaps a slight cooling, labor shortages due to wars and epidemics, all of these led to lower yields and food crises. Food shortages led to famine, disease, social discontent, and further weakening of the empire. Thus, the economic crisis in the late Roman Empire was not just a set of isolated problems, it was a chain reaction, an interrelated set of negative trends which reinforced each other. Inflation undermined trade, trade problems reduced tax revenues, and resource shortages weakened the army and state apparatus. It was as if the empire was losing blood, dying of economic exhaustion. But the economic crisis was only one side of the coin. In the following chapters, we will look at other key factors in Rome's fall: political instability, military problems, and social change. And you will see how all these factors intertwined and reinforced each other, leading to disaster. Stay tuned to continue our investigation and uncover all the mysteries of the fall of the great Roman Empire. Don't miss the next chapter. The Roman Republic was once famous for its political institutions, senate, popular assemblies, clear separation of powers. But over time, these institutions began to degenerate, giving way to autocracy and arbitrary rule. Imperial power, originally conceived as a temporary measure, became absolute and uncontrollable, and that's where the real problems began. The main problem was the incredible instability of imperial power. In the late empire, emperors changed like gloves. Decades were ruled not by strong and wise leaders, but by random people nominated by the army or palace intrigue. Emperors became puppets in the hands of the guard or powerful dignitaries, unable to effectively rule the vast empire. The average reign of an emperor in the 3rd century was only a few years, and some didn't even stay in power for a year. This succession of rulers led to complete chaos in government. It was impossible to conduct long-term policy, to solve urgent problems, when each new emperor sought to cross out the deeds of his predecessor and promote his favorites. Corruption flourished in full bloom, embezzlement reached unprecedented proportions, and the efficiency of the state apparatus was rapidly declining. The situation was aggravated by constant civil wars. The struggle for power between different groups and armies led to bloody conflicts, which devastated the provinces, killed thousands of people, and weakened the military power of the empire. Roman legions, once invincible in foreign wars, were increasingly fighting each other on their own soil. Instead of repelling the onslaught of barbarians, the army spent its energies on internal strife. The central authority in Rome was gradually losing control over the provinces. Local governors and military commanders became increasingly independent, ignoring instructions from the capital and acting in their own interests. The empire seemed to be falling apart, losing unity and control. Some provinces even had their own emperors, challenging the authority of Rome. Political instability was thus a powerful factor in the disintegration of the Roman Empire. The succession of emperors, civil wars, corruption, and weakening of central authority all undermined the foundations of statehood, making the empire vulnerable to external threats and internal problems. Political chaos amplified economic crisis, and conversely, economic problems fueled political instability. It was a vicious cycle from which Rome could no longer escape. But political instability isn't the whole story either. In the next chapter, we will turn to the military problems, which also played a fatal role in the fall of Rome. We will learn why the invincible Roman army began to suffer defeats and how this affected the fate of the empire. We have already looked at the economic and political weaknesses that were eating away at the Roman Empire from within, but an external blow, a military blow, was the final nail that finally buried Rome's greatness. In this chapter, we will talk about the military crisis and the barbarians at the gates of the empire. The Roman army was once the best in the world. Disciplined legions, superb organization, advanced military technology. All of these things allowed Rome to conquer nations and expand its possessions for centuries. But as time went on, even this invincible machine began to break down. The Roman army of the late empire is no longer the legions of the time of Caesar or Trajan. One of the key problems was the army manning crisis. Roman citizenship was no longer attractive to many, and service in the legions was no longer an honorable duty. Fewer and fewer Romans wanted to become soldiers. The empire had to increasingly hire barbarians, representatives of the very tribes that Rome had once conquered. Barbarians became more and more numerous in the Roman army, occupied command positions, and as a result, the loyalty of the army to the empire became increasingly questionable. Discipline in the army was also falling. Civil wars, political instability, economic problems, all of these things were corroding the army from within. Legions increasingly interfered in politics, proclaimed their emperors, participated in rebellions and coups. The army's ability to fight was declining, and its loyalty to the state gave way to loyalty to its commanders. The technical superiority of the Roman army was also gradually lost. The barbarians learned to fight from the Romans, adopted their tactics and weapons, and in some aspects even surpassed them. Roman war machines ceased to be invincible, and the barbarians began to feel their strength. And so, the onslaught of the barbarians. The great migration of peoples, which began in the 4th century, fell on the Roman Empire with all its might. Huns, Goths, Vandals, Franks, Alans. Different tribes moved to the borders of the empire in search of new lands and wealth. Roman army, weakened by internal problems, could no longer hold back this powerful flow. Barbarians were not just raiding. They invaded the territory of the empire, settled in Roman lands, created their kingdoms. Rome lost province after province. Vandals captured North Africa, Visigoths, Spain and Gaul, Franks, Gaul, Anglo-Saxons, Britain. Western Roman Empire gradually shrank to the size of Italy, and then Italy itself fell under the blows of barbarians. In 410, the Visigoths sacked Rome, a symbolic event that shook the world. The Eternal City, the capital of the world, fell to the barbarians. It was a blow not only military, but also psychological. The myth of Rome's invincibility was shattered. The final point in the history of the Western Roman Empire was 476, when the last Roman emperor was overthrown by the barbarian warlord Odoacer. The empire fell. Western Rome ceased to exist. But the fall of Rome is not just a military defeat. It is the result of a complex of causes which we have discussed in previous chapters. Economic crisis, political instability, and a military strike by barbarians. All of these factors interacted and reinforced each other, leading to disaster. So we have come to the end of our journey into the history of the fall of the great Roman Empire. We have looked at economic crisis, political instability, military attack by barbarians, the three main reasons that led to the demise of one of the greatest civilizations in history. But what does this mean for us today? What lessons can we learn from this historical tragedy? The first and perhaps most important lesson of the fall of Rome is the lesson about the importance of economic stability. The economy is the foundation of any nation, and if that foundation begins to crack, the entire building can collapse. Inflation, trade problems, resource scarcity, social inequality, all of these economic ills were eating away at Rome from within, weakening its power and resilience. And that lesson is still relevant today. A strong and healthy economy is a necessary condition for the prosperity of any country in any era. The second lesson is a lesson on the importance of political stability and good governance. Political chaos, corruption, weak government, civil wars, all of these paralyzed the Roman Empire, preventing it from responding effectively to external and internal threats. Strong political institutions, responsible leadership, and the rule of law are necessary for the stability and prosperity of any society. And this lesson also does not lose its relevance in the 21st century. The third lesson is a lesson on the importance of military power and security. Rome fell not only because of internal problems, but also under the blows of external enemies. A strong army, the ability to defend its borders, the most important attribute of sovereignty and security of any state. And even in the modern world, despite all the changes, military strength remains an important factor in international relations. But there is a deeper lesson that we can learn from the fall of Rome. The history of the Roman Empire is a reminder that nothing lasts forever under the moon. Even the most powerful empires can collapse if they lose touch with reality, if they forget their values and principles, if they don't adapt to a changing world. History is a constant movement, constant challenges, and only those who are able to learn from the mistakes of the past can successfully face the future. The fall of the Roman Empire is not just a story about the distant past. It is a mirror in which we can see a reflection of contemporary issues and challenges. Economic crises, political polarization, international tensions, social inequality, all these problems were familiar to the Romans, and by studying their experiences, we can better understand ourselves and our world. History is not just a collection of dates and facts. It is a treasure trove of wisdom and experience that can help us make the right choices in the present and build a better future. Let us not forget the lessons of history. Let us learn from the mistakes of the past so that we do not repeat them in the present and future. Thank you for being with us on this journey into the history of the fall of the Roman Empire. I hope you found it interesting and informative. Subscribe to our channel not to miss new historical investigations and discoveries. See you soon.